It's all yours.
Thank you, Phil, and welcome everyone. On behalf of the Association for Commuter Transportation, I'd like to thank Phil and Cutter for co-hosting and sponsoring this event today to talk about Vanpool marketing and tips for Vanpool Marketing Success. If you had the opportunity this year to attend the Association for Commuter Transportation Conference in San Antonio, you saw that this was a very popular panel discussion. So we're grateful today to have Stuart Anderson and Carolyn Newsom join us to present this via the webinar to expose more people to the opportunity to participate. Our first speaker today is Stuart Anderson, and I was one of the people on that survey who clicked the Since the Dawn of Time button. I had the opportunity during my very first week on the job some 16 years ago to attend an event where Stuart was the speaker talking about Vanpool and TDM, and one of the companies that was represented in that meeting became interested in the Vanpool program, rapidly became one of our largest clients here in the Star Vanpool program in Houston. So thank you, Stuart, for teeing that up. So let me try to tee you up appropriately. Stuart is with Steer Davies Cleave. He is experienced in developing successful urban and transportation planning solutions and is an internationally recognized speaker on transportation demand management. He has led many regional corridor planning studies and managed traffic mitigation efforts for highway and light rail construction projects, including developing a TDM program for the $1.7 billion corridor project in the Denver region. Stuart also has extensive national and international experience in forming and maintaining public-private partnerships to address transportation and air quality issues, including the establishment of over 30 transportation management associations globally. Prior to joining Steer Davies Cleave, Stuart founded the transportation planning firm Urban Trans Consultants and grew the company to 8 offices internationally before selling the company in 2012. He was also previously executive director for the Association for Commuter Transportation. Stuart?
Well, David, that's very generous. Thank you for that introduction. I'm not all that old, but I have been in this industry a long time. Well, hello, everyone. No need to respond. I know you're all on mute. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I thought I would start out our webinar today with just a quick overview of some of what I see as the do's and don'ts that relate to vanpooling, and this is solely my perspective based on the experiences that I have. So let me walk back a little bit and talk about when I was introduced to vanpooling and give a little history behind where I'm at today. Back in the early and middle 1980s, when many of you may not have even been born, I worked for the Bechtel Corporation as an intern in San Francisco. And of course, my commute was unbelievably bad. But again, when you don't have a lot of money, you do what you can to get where you need to be. But the interesting thing about my employer is that I noted that every morning and every afternoon, before and after work, that there were vans that circled the whole block where Bechtel was located. And each of the vans had a destination listed in the window. And I thought that was the coolest thing, and I would have loved to have participated, but I figured that being an intern, I wasn't eligible. I always took a curiosity into how these vans worked, and it's been something that I feel can be a component that will help employers with the recruitment and retention of employees, addressing their transportation issues, all of this together being important in making our commutes better and providing greater choices. So let me go to the next slide with kind of my overview of what I'll be covering. What I'd like to talk about is how to create the right image for a vanpool, and I'll refer to some of the focus group discussions that I've had in the past. I'll talk a little bit about understanding the market for vanpooling, motivating through targeted messaging, linking to other transportation and community priorities, and using pricing and incentives appropriately. I had the great privilege of working with David McMaster a number of years ago when we were designing a Vanpool program in the Houston area to help with the trips that occurred during the reconstruction of the I-10 corridor west of Houston, which is known as the Energy Corridor. And vanpooling seemed to be of the greatest interest with the employers along that area. And with the help of many folks, we were successful in creating over 200, we used only minivans, mini pools, within a little bit more than a year. And that was an amazing experience to see how vans work, what people thought of them, and getting some feedback from them. Since the mitigation effort has concluded, those vans have been incorporated within the STAR Vanpool program that David currently manages. So let's switch to the next slide, creating the right image. As far as the don'ts, let me start with those. Don't use vans as moving billboards. In focus groups, time and time again, that is a big issue for people that ride in vans. They don't want to feel, as one focus group participant told me, that they didn't want to be perceived as somebody who has a DUI and has to do community service picking garbage up along the freeway in those big yellow vans. Orange vans. That's what we have here in Colorado where I'm based. Our vans weren't orange, but they were billboards. And while it was a great strategy for us in thinking about how we could make things appealing, it was a disaster with the vanpoolers. And our local rideshare agency developed a rather cutesy campaign focused around superheroes and such, and it fell flat on its face. So don't use vans as moving billboards. Don't make vanpooling cutesy. This is what business people will be traveling in. This is what business people will be parking at their employer sites. This is what business people will be parking in their driveways if they're the van driver. On the other side of the spectrum, having plain white vans with some logo that looks like a government agency doesn't work very well either. And again, that's kind of relating back to the focus group comment that I mentioned earlier. How should we design our vans? How do we want to portray them? Well, first off, people have said, keep it simple. Use colors that people would normally use in purchasing a car. Not to say that white is bad, but white tends to imply that it's a government vehicle. Create a very clean and crisp image. And of course, always think about what you would like to see parked in your neighbor's driveway, and making sure that it isn't an eyesore for the community. These are all important things. I've looked at various vans over the years and recently picked up on vans that I found to be quite appealing. The Vanpool program in Dallas is, I think that there's a great image, and many of you out there who work in the Vanpool field have vans that are similarly styled, where they are inviting and aren't obnoxious about all the advertising that could occur on them. I do think that putting something on the vehicle that allows people to call a number to find out what it's about is important. But at the end of the day, again, commuters say they really don't care who's paying for it, who's managing it. They just want to go to one simple place to find out the information they need, and they want to be able to participate, and that's about it. So I'm sure all of you have had experiences related to that as well, and I won't go on with mine, but certainly this has been something that has been a bit of a challenge in different regions. Moving on to the next issue on our next slide, understanding the market. Again, the don'ts, from my perspective, are don't assume that vanpoolers are car-free. And ultimately what that gets to is whether vanpooling is a choice for individuals or if they're dependent on the van. And by far, what I've seen through the surveys of vanpoolers is that it is a choice, that they're either choosing to get out of their car or they're choosing something that's different from what they've done previously. So it is a choice, and it is something we need to maintain as being appealing. The comfortable seats and things of that nature will certainly play into it. Don't limit yourself to certain income levels or necessarily the 20-mile plus commuter distance rule. I mean, I certainly agree with the 20-mile plus, but in many communities it may be different. So, for example, in San Francisco, sharing the ride in a van across the Bay Bridge or other areas where there are heavy tolls, being in a shared form of transportation, you get discounted or free passage through that area. And so that is added value. And with the topography and the congestion in San Francisco, it's not always 20 miles that will be applied in this. So think about your communities, think about where congestion occurs, and in some cases, if there is a time savings related to using a van, that can be very motivating for individuals. Harkening back to this energy corridor project on the I-10 corridor in Houston, one of the things that made vanpooling successful was that there was an HOV facility along that corridor, and during construction, when congestion got worse, getting the vans out there and having them use these high occupancy vehicle lanes became very appealing, and it was a high motivator for many of the folks that we talked to about their experience with our mini pool vanpool program. Don't assume that rotating schedules destroy vanpools. In fact, some of the best vanpools I've seen is where they've worked through scheduling issues to get people into vanpools as well as carpools by pegging these employees together and allowing them to rotate together as a group. And I've seen some employers where whatever seniority one person has in the van, that seniority carries over to the van overall. So if that means that that person has access to a parking space, that can be used. If the schedule changes, happen in a way that with seniority you get the time slot that you want, you're probably helping out your van riders as well. But rotating schedules aren't necessarily a barrier. I worked with an employer in Canada, north of Toronto, and when we first met with them, they essentially had probably about 5% of their employees sharing the ride to work in a carpool. And the rotating, multiple shifts and rotating schedules really limited the ability for them to get more out of their commute program. But when we worked with that employer to allow employees to rotate together, we ended up, after about a year of implementation, at over 90% of these employees using some form of shared travel to the workplace. And it was a site where they had many lower income individuals who are motivated to seek out the cost savings that could be accrued. I found, in my experience, and I may be biased as a parent of three, but child care plays into people's decisions about, where they're going to be. And I did a study that was published with TRB where we looked at placing child care at station areas and looking at child care as something that could complement transportation. And overall, what we found is that parents with children under 2 tend to like to have their child close to them. After 2, they want them to socialize in the neighborhood and are more likely to want a child care facility in their area. I mention this because there have been programs that have built off the child care element. In the Los Angeles area along the State Route 14 corridor between Palmdale and the San Fernando Valley, there was a 6-month initiative where vanpooling was being promoted, and that at the end of the vanpooling, participants were allowed to receive child care coupons, the savings, at the end of this effort. And it was very successful. And it was targeting that demographic up in the high desert Palmdale area where there were many young families, and that was successful. Another strategy that was done in Orange County with a medical care company is that they set up staging areas for vanpool formation at child care locations where they had extra parking available. and used that parking lot for their employees. Moving along, looking at some of the messaging, certainly don't preach, don't ignore the motivators that go with different people. The Greens are in many cases already participating. Heartlanders may not be willing to give up their car, and I can go into this in greater detail, but you kind of get the gist of where this is headed. And this is based off of a demographic study that was done in the San Francisco Bay Area. And certainly what's in it for me always is important for folks, and that is not necessarily just money. What we want to do is focus on the indirect costs, the time savings that can be accrued, the cost savings. And in our research through focus groups, we found that we can appeal better to the vanpooler by focusing on how that time savings could be applied in your daily life. And certainly, last but not least, highlighting the convenience of vanpooling. Moving on to the next slide. Oops. Excuse me, I messed up here for just a second. My slide switched faster than I thought. I have to back up to understanding the market. Sorry for the technical error. I just wanted to wrap up that understanding of the market by mentioning, certainly research areas that are underserved by transit. That was done in the Portland metro area, was successful, and we didn't set up vanpools to compete with transit, and that was a great approach. Certainly addressing the challenges that commuters face, we're finding increasingly that individualized marketing campaigns have been successful in garnering support. And then last on this item, understanding the market, folks find that if they have to bring their car in 3 or 4 or 5 days per month, they might as well just buy a monthly parking pass. And instead of getting into a vanpool, I did a demonstration project in downtown LA where we tested the idea of giving 3 parking tokens to vanpoolers and carpoolers to allow them to come in at least 3 days and not have to pay the excessively high daily rates. So moving on to my next slide, sorry about that, linking to other transportation and community priorities. Certainly don't position vanpooling as a solve-all. While the Seattle region is very, very successful with their vanpools and have the largest fleet probably in the country, and I think that's still the case, there was a short period of time where vanpools were looked at as the primary solution to congestion, and there was quite a pushback on this, and it was related, for those who are in the Seattle area, to the locally preferred alternative for the I-405 corridor, where vanpooling became the preferred strategy, which, from my perspective, was great, but politicians and community leaders pushed back on that concept. As far as the do's with the priorities of the community, we found vanpooling to be very successful in construction mitigation projects. So you would subsidize those vans during the period where lanes may be taken away or there may be shutdowns of particular exits or entrances to the freeway. So it has been successful. I won't go into great detail, but if any of you are looking at doing a mitigation program on a highway construction project, I can provide you with quite a bit of information about this and the project that David had mentioned, the T-Rex project that was a $1.7 billion reconstruction project in Denver, which had a heavy TDM component during the mitigation program, is documented on the Federal Highways Administration website. So I can point you in that direction if you're interested. Just email me. Building ridership for new service, that's something that vanpools can certainly do. And in some cases, replacing inefficient transit lines with vanpools. We did that in the southeast area of Denver, and that what we found is that approximately 50% of the people were willing to make that switch into vanpools from transit. And then connect to child care and other needs of the commuters, and I mentioned that case example from the State Route 14. Moving along, using pricing and incentives appropriately, certainly don't over-subsidize. I found some very negative results with over-subsidizing vans. That may not be the case for all of you. I know that in certain employer contexts that over-subsidizing the van doesn't bring in people who sign up and don't really use it. So it really depends on the corporate culture and the focus of what's being offered. Don't create an environment wherein riders are not motivated to fill seats. because obviously riders would like to have a lot of room to spread out, but they're not going to be motivated to fill that seat if it doesn't impact them financially. What we should do, in my opinion, is price the cost of vans in relation to transit. So what we have back in the early days when we were working with Vanpools in Denver is that we set the cost of a Vanpool at the same level of what a transit pass would be for a long-distance commuter. And so that kept it in line with what costs people were being faced with. Make sure that your program is reported to the National Transit Database. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that, but essentially you can recoup up to about a third of your costs. There's about a 2-year lag between when you would receive those funds. And one thing I really want to underscore here, and it is very important, is that by reporting this information and collecting additional dollars, you are not taking money away from other transportation activities within your community. This money comes from the federal level, so if you don't tap into it, it won't be going anywhere else in your state. So I've encountered that hurdle in many cases, the sense that if we provide funding for Vanpools, we're going to have trouble with our transit system. We'll be stealing their money, and that's not the case. Allow for rational economic decisions. While we like to say that many people are in love with the car, the reality is Americans love choices and they love convenience. And if we make things logical, like pricing it in ways that people can make rational decisions, we will have greater success. And I always like to point to the example of when I moved to Denver about 16 years ago, I was tasked with promoting some transit services in the southeast area. The first thing that I found out is that taking a transit line would take you 3 times longer than driving your car. So promoting that was asking people to be irrational about their economic decision-making, irrational about their use of personal time, and I can go on and on. So be aware of really that's what people want to see. Apply incentives appropriately. I like to first say that the subsidies really are trying to level the playing field. Incentives can bring people in. So a try strategy might be something, try a van for free for a month, or ride a van for 6 months and you're eligible for this child care voucher. So those are try strategies. Maintenance incentives really relate back to that level playing field and making sure that people aren't making bad economic choices by choosing vanpooling. They should be saving some money. Acknowledgements are increasingly important, and for those of you who work in the social media, we're beginning to see more and more this use of badges as a way to motivate participation. And what I mean by badges is that, for example, through various social media tools, that somebody could earn, the gold level commuter because you use a van every day, or whatever that might be. A silver level walker if you walk to where your van picks up you and other folks. Moving to the next slide, I want to first thank all of you for sitting through this presentation. Many of my points were my personal opinion based on some of the experiences that I've had. As I conclude, I just wanted to end with a little bit about the mini pool program we did in Houston. We did some fairly extensive research on the people who were using our vans, where they came from, what they were doing before, and even looking at where they'd be going in the future when subsidies were going to be shifting. We found overall that the income level was higher than average. We found that most folks were at the professional level. We found that from an ethnic background, there was a good mix of different elements of the community in Houston and Houston only. We found a disproportionately large amount of Asian individuals participating in Vanpools. So that's pretty much all I had to say. On this last slide, you'll see my email address, which is stuart.anderson@sduworld.net, and the phone number below, 303-472-0639, is me as well. So feel free to contact me as needed, and I will pass this back to David.
Thank you very much, Stuart. Great presentation, lots of wonderful information there. I see that we're already starting to collect a few questions for Stuart. We're going to hold all of the questions until the end of our second presentation so that we can address them all together. Some of the questions may apply to more than one of the presenters. Our next presenter is Carolyn Newsom. Carolyn joined Intercity Transit's Vanpool program in Olympia, Washington in 1997 as a Vanpool specialist, which interestingly corresponds with when I was sitting in that first meeting on my first week of the job listening to Stuart talk to a group of employers about the value of vanpooling and other TDM. So it seems that Carolyn and I have been on a similar path for Vanpool. She currently manages Intercity Transit's Vanpool, rideshare, and community van programs with a staff of 4 and a fleet of 235 vans. As Vanpool manager, Carolyn oversees Vanpool services, their regional ride match service, and Intercity Transit's community and surplus van grant programs. She supports marketing and outreach to area employers and their military base to the north of Olympia. Carolyn is currently the chair of ACT's Vanpool Council and serves on the working group developing the statewide public transportation plan for the state of Washington. She earned a bachelor's degree from Evergreen State College and started her career in public transportation as a bus driver for Monterey Salinas Transit. Carolyn's going to talk to us today about using social media as an effective way to increase the number of Vanpool customers and help with retention. Carolyn?
Great, David. Thank you so much. And I want to say that I started in 1997 and I was 10. So I was sort of a prodigy in Vanpool. So as David said, my name is Carolyn Newsom, and I'm the Vanpool manager for Intercity Transit. Today, Intercity Transit has 220 Vanpools. So I want to talk to you about social media and its role in finding, retaining, and maybe even making happiness happen with your customers. So it's here, and we're going to have to play with it, I'm sure. So we currently have a Facebook page. We have a Twitter account. We have a YouTube channel, Flickr for photo sharing. We have a program blog and a corporate blog. So our program blog is when we're doing our bicycle commuter contest, our wheel options, which is a ride-sharing contest. Our corporate blog usually comes from our general manager, and we use Constant Contact for email communications. We didn't jump into all these at once. We started out slow and added different applications as we could or as we felt that there was a need. I was asked to do social media presentation for the ACT conference, and we have a pretty small program here at Intercity Transit. But luckily for me, my friends up north at King County Metro have a wonderful Vanpool-specific Facebook page, and it's amazing. So my friend Victoria Tobin was kind enough to let me use her stuff. So they have an innovative, funny, successful program that I'm going to share with you, and you can see the difference between a big program, a well-managed program. King County Metro has 1,200 Vanpool groups, half of what we have in this state. Stuart mentioned that we have the largest Vanpool program, largest public Vanpool program in the country is in the Pacific Northwest, but half of those Vanpools are at King County Metro. And so you'll get a chance to see what happens when a big program has a wonderful social media presence, and then you'll be able to see a smaller program like ours who is dipping our toes into this new adventure. So, first cell phone was in 1973, and it cost $4,000, and it gave 30 minutes of talk time. So Martin Cooper, who invented this, dubbed it the brick, because it weighed 2 pounds and it sold for about $4,000, and it would let you talk for 30 minutes, and then it had to be plugged in for about a week. And now sleep texting is a thing. So there are young people who are sending text while they're asleep. And so social media is here to stay. What can we do to use it to assist us in marketing our Vanpool program and retaining riders and getting new riders? So using social media to enhance customer service. I think now everybody expects you to have a social media presence. It isn't going away, and if we embrace it, it can enhance our Vanpool starts, our recruitment, and our customer service. Again, I mentioned I'll share King County Metro's Vanpool page and their and the Intercity Transit social media efforts, and I'll provide a few tips for you if you're considering adding social media to your marketing and customer service efforts. At Intercity Transit, we started social media in 2009. We started slow, and we added different applications as we had time or as we felt we had a need. We're a mid-sized agency, and there's only one person who handles the social media. So if you're a small organization, you don't need to dive into the deep end of the pool. You can start small. You can control how many of these different sites you want to use and how often you want to post. However, you do need to make sure you respond. The difference between social media and other kinds of media we're used to is other kinds of media just pushes out the message. Well, now we're trying to have a conversation. So when people respond to you, you need to respond back. So you want to make sure that you don't have social media sites that you're ignoring. Social media is free, except for time, which isn't really free, but it is something that you can use easily. It doesn't have to take a lot of time. You can decide how much time it's going to cost you, and you can choose how often you post, and you can get post notifications to your email that you don't actually even have to go on Facebook to check your pages, and you can pre-post information. That's what we do here when we're going to have a detour for a parade on Sunday. We pre-post on our Facebook page, and then it comes up on our Twitter, and it comes up on the appropriate day and tells folks there's going to be a detour or something along those lines. So like I mentioned, social media is two-way communication. That's how it's different than other marketing we do. Unlike a website where you're just pushing information out, social media provides an opportunity for others to join in the conversation. And it adds a more personal feel to your agency. Again, I think people expect it from us now. Rather than feeling corporate, you can interact as individuals. So, have some fun with your social media. Your posts don't always have to include facts and figures. Post pictures from events, share videos with relevant content, ask questions to engage your audience. Lots of Facebook pages have a Throwback Thursday. Our person puts up an older picture of something and asks people if they know what it is, and then people interact. Have a promotion, like a photo contest or something like that. Create a social media calendar so that you can organize what you post, and it helps you stay on track. You can schedule your posts so that you can remind customers, and you can also schedule your posts so that you can remind yourself that you need to deal with something or let them know that there's a public meeting or the board meeting. Social media is just another customer service tool. It doesn't replace anything you're currently doing, and again, it's free. So you control your level of engagement, but you want to make sure that you are following through with that, whatever you pick. So start slow and only use tools that work for you. If you don't know how to do everything, don't worry about it. Maybe just start with a Facebook page, see how it goes, and go on from there. Just because you start a Facebook page or Twitter account, that doesn't mean you have to continue. Intercity Transit has a corporate blog that doesn't get much play, so we don't spend much time on it. If there's something major going on for our organization, we have our general manager post on that blog, but we get a lot more interest in the activity-specific blogs that we post about our bicycle commuter contest or wheel options or something along those lines. Listen and interact. Let your followers drive what you post. If you post something and you get chatter, then do something similar later. So make a note that people were interested in Throwback Thursday or whatever. The most important thing is to make sure that you interact. If someone posts a compliment, say thank you. If they ask a question, make sure you give them an answer. Or if you don't have an answer, let them know that you're looking into it. There's also times when you can miss a question or comment, and make sure you apologize and see if they still need help. There's a human element, and so be a human, but try to interact with people as they're interacting with you. So allow posting. We allow anything to do with transportation or active transportation. Some agencies get worried that someone might post a negative comment. There's a couple of ways of looking at it. One way is that we should know what people think, and that's one way to do that. The other thing is the rest of the page, the rest of the followers tend to take care of it. So occasionally we had one of our buses was used to hold protesters and keep them warm and safe because the police didn't have a vehicle large enough. And we got lots of negative stuff on our Facebook page about that wasn't our mission, and nowhere in our mission did it say prison bus. And so we just had our general manager respond and say the police asked for help and we helped them. We've had people post this driver or that driver's mean or your buses are empty, and other people take it up for you and say that's not true, and so that's the easiest way to deal with it, and you can always delete it. So try not to be afraid about that. I think that, again, if there's something really bad, it's against your posting policies, then you can delete it. But most of the time, Facebook itself takes care of it. So here's what my friends at King County Metro did. They did an award-winning program. They did a Halloween costume where people shared photos of themselves in their costumes with their vans. And so I put a couple of the pictures in here because I think they're hilarious. So here's King County Metro's information, and if you download the slides, you'll have that information. And there's my friend Victoria. Again, thank her for letting me steal her stuff. So here's, I think the contest said that the Vanpool had to be in the background, and so here's a family group, and somebody feeling witchy, and people being goofy, and here's the winner. So, you know, if you've ever watched Breaking Bad, you know what an absolute good costume that is. So this got people interested and involved, and I was at a meeting on Monday with folks from King County Metro, and they're doing this same campaign again, having people take pictures of their Halloween costumes with their vans. So this is something that's fun and easy and gives you pictures later to put on your Facebook page. So here's our Facebook page, and again, we do not have a Vanpool specific one like King County Metro. We just use the Vanpool page. But this, the picture you can see that looks like a van is a cake. So here is one of my Vanpool groups made a cake for their coordinator who was retiring. So that was a great thing to post on our Facebook page, and then we did an incentive program, and then that's one of my Vanpool coordinators giving away the prize. And so that gave us a whole lot of activity to put on our page. When David introduced me, he mentioned the surplus van grant. So we grant 4 vans every year to nonprofits in our service area. We always make sure that we post that on our Facebook page. We get a lot of chatter from that. We did a contest called It Happened on My Commute. And we got some wonderful, wonderful things. We asked writers to send in stories, and we heard about baby showers and cancer fundraisers, an annual Christmas tailgate, breakfast, and some stories, of course, we didn't use. So social media is interactive. So if you need something to spark interest and break down barriers, this is a good thing to do, is say what happened on your commute. And again, they send them to us so we controlled what we put up. So how can vanpooling be difficult if the group is having a baby shower in the van? I use these pictures and stories in all my presentations to my board and the general public. And so here's another one. It says it really didn't happen on my commute, and I don't think I would call it heartfelt. Actually, our Vanpool rides are rather boring. But then this person goes on to say we do, however, have fun activity each year that I think is probably fairly unique. We have an annual Christmas tailgate potluck. And, you know, in Washington, having a Christmas potluck means it's in the rain or the snow because it's in December. And so these folks didn't even think that was remarkable. So it gives us a chance to have a conversation about how much fun it is and how little families form around this. So one more Vanpool story. We had somebody who said we celebrate our successes and sorrows, highs and lows, and sometimes those in-between moments when life just happens and we roll with the punches. If our van could speak, it would tell stories that our husbands and wives may not be privy to. How could that be scary? What a wonderful experience. And so we posted these stories on our Facebook page, and we had a contest and gave away, I think, a $50 gift certificate. So Intercity Transit has Twitter, and so we do the same kinds of things with that others do with Twitter. So we have a Twitter feed. And I put this up. I just saw a story in NPR about this Go Loco, and young people are using this to ride share, and they can also use this to figure out where their church is, to figure out where events are, organizations they want to belong with. So this is the part where I say, what is your brand worth? So if I could hear you, I would ask you what these are, and you would tell me that's a KitchenAid mixer. You might not be as familiar with the dress, but that's Kim Kardashian wearing a dress that's called the Aurora. So, Danger Will Robinson. Some of you will know what that means. The ones of you who don't know what that means, pretend it's CP30. It's the first nervous robot, so it was kind of the start to Star Trek. So, here are some tweets that went out both on the KitchenAid brand and under Aurora. So the KitchenAid brand, the night that the President Obama the night that President Obama was debating Governor Romney, this went up from KitchenAid, and it says, Obama's grandma even knew it was going to be bad. She died 3 days before he became president. And the Aurora one says, Aurora is trending clearly about our Kim Kardashian-inspired dress. Well, that was when the Aurora theater shooting was. And, of course, the KitchenAid thing, the young man that was tweeting was not in his account, his private account. He was on his corporate account. So when things like that happen, then all you can do is say, sorry, sorry, sorry. And that's what these folks did, is say, sorry, sorry, sorry. When something like this happens, you spend a lot more time apologizing. I think the folks for the President Obama, I think it was up a minute and a half, and it went viral. It went everywhere. So you want to make sure that the person who is doing this stuff for your social media understands how important it is and understands that they are representing their employer and that everything is permanent. So that's what I have for you, and my contact information is up there too, and I think David's going to take questions also.
Great. Thank you very much, Carolyn. Some very interesting stuff regarding social media. I think all of us have at least some interest in how to make our social media efforts more effective. We do have a few questions in the queue, but there is plenty of time for additional questions. So at this time, if you have questions, please go ahead and enter them in, and we will start getting to them. Meanwhile, Stuart, Carolyn, are you both ready to field a few questions?
Yep, we're ready.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, let's start. I'm going to start with Stuart. One of the specific things in your presentation talked about maintenance incentives. I have a question here. What kind of maintenance incentives have others used and found to be successful? In this particular case, she points out that they have issues with late or missed preventive maintenance plans in their program, so they're interested in how incentives might help.
Very good. First, I would consider an ongoing subsidy as a maintenance incentive, but the most effective type of strategy that we're finding today is applying a gamification tool to van pooling. And what it allows is for participants to record their trips, and then they can be eligible for prizes. They can work towards a badge. You can build in various motivators and make it fun for people to stay involved. And the more we can engage the folks, the more likely they'll stay with the van. And for those of you who may not be familiar with the term gamification, gamification is simply using IT tools that can help us engage with individuals. For example, we're currently wrapping up a project with the Intuit Corporation in San Francisco where we've used a gamification tool that will be applied for their employees that relate to their launch of a Vanpool program, which is happening shortly.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to return actually to the first question now. Stuart, when you were talking about the brand images, we did receive a request that it would be great to see pictures of some of the things that would be good to look at from a branding vehicle marking perspective. I think that's kind of a task that we might want to take on through the Vanpool Council to assemble that. But she also has an additional question about how do you balance the vendor advertising when your agency doesn't own the vehicles? So I guess we had that experience here in Houston as well, where some of the vehicles were marked with the van provider partners' graphics rather than our program graphics.
Well, it certainly needs to start with being very clear with your Vanpool vendor about how you intend to package this Vanpool program, what imaging you intend to use. I mean, I certainly recognize that there is a need to put a number on the vehicle so that people can call and find out more about it. But from the commuter perspective, they really don't care who you are, and they don't really care who's paying that subsidy. All they really care is that there's one place they can go for help and that the van is something available to them. But again, as David had mentioned, this has been a sensitive issue with some folks. And one tool that I've seen applied in one area, but I wasn't really all that keen on it, is that they made the logo a magnetic logo so that when you get home you can take it off, but when you drive again you can put it back on. I'm not a fan of that, but that was one way that it was addressed.
Okay, thank you. I have a question here that I also want to hear the answer to. Are there successful examples of Vanpools in smaller cities? For example, a metro area with 100,000. This is a large metropolitan area that we serve here, but we also serve some small urban and some rural areas in our regional program, and those smaller areas are always a challenge. So I would open this question up first to Carolyn in case there are examples in Washington State, but then also to Stuart.
Yeah, we have, because of the state capital being a generator for work, to the south of us we have small cities and counties, Lewis County, Mason County, Grace Harbor County, that started their lives as logging areas, and many of those jobs have gone. And all three of those transit agencies have Vanpool programs. And Grace Harbor has 30. Mason Transit has like 18. And so I think that, yeah, I think that there are examples of people who have had successful programs in small cities. I think you need a destination. There needs to be some place people are traveling to work.
Stuart, anything to add?
Sure. There's quite a few smaller communities that have successful Vanpool programs, but these are, in many cases, the oddball communities that are out there, those that have a particularly strong focus on the environment and as other issues. At one point here in Colorado, the town of Vail, which is a ski resort town, had more Vanpool vehicles than Denver did. And the reason for that is that they've been having to reach out further and further to find workers to bring into the area because of the cost of housing and other factors. And that was very successful. But again, that's a very unique situation. Franklin, Tennessee is another example of a community that's very proactive in this area. and have done some very successful things. And I can go on with the various examples. There's quite a few. But what I'd like to conclude with is Fort Collins, which is a community here in the North Front Range of Colorado. And I believe they're about a community of 100,000 people. And they have, at least the last time I checked, they had about 100 vans, of which 80% were destination Denver. And I really applaud the folks that have managed and made that program so effective. The program is called Van Go. And Fort Collins is the closest to a real community that I can think of with small. But that's my response.
Okay, thank you. We have a number of questions coming through about incentives. So I'm going to read a couple of them real quickly and then let you guys jump in. I know that you both have experience with incentives. Gabriel asks, what is your opinion and or experience with incentive programs that subsidize empty seats for vanpools starting up and for vanpools that have rider loss? And then I also have a question here about when you offered the try vanpooling for free for potential vanpoolers, how long did they have the van on a trial basis, and were there any liability issues? And then I also have one, any experience with incentives given directly to the person that actually leases the van? This would be done to encourage the employee to step up and lease the van for the Vanpool group.
Okay, I'll go first. We currently allow a week free in any of our vans. When a group starts, we subsidize up to 3 empty seats, so they're paying the lowest possible fare. So in that case, we don't do a week free if a group is starting, but anytime somebody new starts, we let them try it for a week for free. And then that month, if they stay with us, and about 90% of the time they do, they then pay the lowest possible fare. And then I've also I did an incentive program where I incentivified the recruiter and the new rider with a $5 coffee card and then a $50 grocery card and then a chance to win an iPad, which is when I discovered humans will do just about anything to win an iPad. And so that was also very successful. And I think for me, I think incentives need to, they're good to get you interested, but they're not necessary long-term, but I think short-term to get somebody interested, that I think they work well.
I think that the empty seat subsidy works well in certain contexts. I think that if a van is starting up, that being able to cover the cost of those empty seats for maybe as far as 3 months might be an effective way to get that started. Others might wait until the van's full before they launch it, and in which case you might want to give the riders at least a month of an empty seat subsidy, and so they have a month to fill that seat. But you definitely want to keep them motivated so that they know that when they bring the person into the van that lowers their cost, and then we'll work toward keeping those seats filled. And then I found that, as I mentioned in the example of the SR14 corridor project that involved the child care voucher coupon, that offering it after 6 months of participation was more cost effective than just giving it to them at the front end, so that they get say for example a free month of vanpooling and a free coupon for a month of child care. That's nice, but you may get a lot of people that are going to only be there for that 1 month. So you have to use that with caution. But again, don't go too far to the point where you're over-subsidizing the van and not allowing people to make rational economic decisions, because what you'll have is a lot of people who will go to vanpooling and become dependent on vanpooling, and you'll be pretty much in a hard spot about having to continue any sort of subsidy or incentives that you're providing. But certainly distinguish between the try strategies and the maintenance strategies.
I will note that here we use, when we're using empty seat subsidies for low ridership situations, we tie that to an overall get well plan that we create for that van based on the real opportunity to return it to a sustainable ridership level. We have a number of questions regarding the social media, particularly as it relates to how many people does it take, how do you monitor it 24/7, do you link and connect with any of your corporate client social media programs. Carolyn, would you like to take a stab at some of those?
Sure. We have one person doing it, and I don't believe King County Metro has many more than that. And the way that you make it work 24 hours a day is that, first of all, you can have it email you what's being posted, and if you come in the morning and somebody's posted something horrid, you take it down. I mean, it just isn't possible to be 24 hours a day. And again, what we have found is when somebody posts something, we'll come in, we'll see the post that says your buses are ugly and so is your mom, and other people will then have posted intercity transit's wonderful, why don't you get off of, whatever. So I think it can take as little or as much time as you need, but I think one person can do it, and the person who does it here is in our marketing department, and it's not her only job. And so she was the one who taught me the tip about that you can pre-post and tell it when to post, and so she has a schedule in terms of if we're going to have any kind of a hearing or a detour or something, so that she can do that ahead of time. And I forgot the rest of the questions.
Well, part of it was what do you do about 24/7 coverage in terms of the comments?
We just let it happen,
Okay.
We do.
And coordinating with linking, connecting with...
we do that. In fact, we have followers that are the energy company here that has all kinds of energy stuff. They will post things that are happening. The biggest city is the city of Olympia, so we have the same thing with the city of Olympia, so that we're cross-posting their stuff, and they're doing the same thing on their Facebook page, and that gives you content too, which is really nice.
Okay. Stuart, we have a question regarding rotating schedules. What happens when Vanpool participants aren't necessarily in the same scheduled time period? As schedules can change every month. I know you kind of hit on this, but maybe if you could elaborate a little more on some of those nuances of making that work.
It is a bit of a painful process to get a group to understand that pairing people together and rotating them together is a benefit to you as an employer, because you're reducing parking demand, you're likely reducing stress for that individual. Riding in a van is obviously less stressful than driving your own car. These are all things that can become important. This comes up fairly frequently with hospitals, because hospitals in many cases can be good candidates for van pooling, but if you have these multiple rotating shifts, it really just keeps breaking them up. Just like at a university, when you end the semester, you lose folks, and you have to kind of start rebuilding. The fun thing that some employers have done in, say, carpool examples, if, for example, David and I are carpooling, and David has a higher seniority than me, then therefore he's less likely to get weekend days that he has to work. Some employers will allow me to reap the benefit of his schedule by pegging myself to him, versus him pegging to me as the more junior person and losing his preferential treatment. That's an incentive, and as long as you work through that, the cost of doing that and such, I think it can be very successful. I don't know if I've addressed the question, but if there's more, maybe we can just get another question.
We have a couple of questions that relate to both NTD and grant funding. So in one case, we're looking for ideas about grant funding, and in the other case, we're looking for ideas on how to overcome issues with a region having chosen not to report to NTD. In this case, the San Francisco Bay Area, which many of us may already be aware, have chosen not to participate in NTD reporting for various reasons. And so the question is, what are your thoughts on this, Stuart? Well,
bringing up the Bay Area is probably not a good one to talk about. In in large part, they're foregoing millions of dollars. I had that number at one point, and it's rather astonishing what they're foregoing. They're foregoing it because they have so many transit districts, and the NTD money comes back into the general pool, so you don't get an automatic repayment from your NTD reporting. So it doesn't come back to you. It goes back to, often in cities like San Francisco, a committee that receives the FTA funding, and they may meet annually or more frequently to go over how they allocate it between districts. Again, they're foregoing money that isn't going to the San Francisco area, so it's not like you're tapping into something else. So I find that a bit frustrating, but I'll leave that at that. I think that the NTD reporting is fairly simple once you get it set up, once you have the ability to collect the right information from the driver. And in some cases, we've seen public agencies subsidizing the period between reporting and receiving, which essentially is 2 years, to make it easier, because it's a little frustrating if you're looking towards getting a subsidy for your van, but you report your miles today and you don't get that subsidy until 2 years, and you may not even know if you're going to still be in the van or even still with that employer.
I will say that I've seen in a couple of other areas of the country initiatives underway in the last few years or currently to start to report to the NTD for vanpools that are operating, for example, in the Washington, D.C. and surrounding region. And I think, as I know from our NTD reporting, the money, when you report to the NTD, the services that you're reporting get allocated to the UZA that the service is operated in or for. So the recipient may not necessarily be the program operator, but the region overall benefits from that money coming back and being available to be used for transit improvements in the region. So I would certainly encourage the powers that be to try to figure out a way to overcome the obstacles to doing that. In a related question, I'm going to read this question because I'm not sure I can paraphrase it. Both speakers seem to be speaking from the perspective of vanpool programs organized and operated by specific localities, i.e. a metro area or a large or small city. In my part of the world, this effort gets undertaken by regional entities, i.e. TDM agencies. Can either of you comment on the differences in operating and marketing programs in one environment versus the other? So I think really to talk about maybe some of the different challenges of operating as a regional TDM entity as opposed to a specific locality.
Let me go first. My opinion is that the larger the area that you can capture and have consistent branding, the more likely that you'll be successful. I've been pushing now for a number of years for the state of Colorado to create a vanpool program statewide where CDOT, our Department of Transportation, could support the provision of these vans and tap into lower costs that CDOT is able to tap into, and making that statewide so that there's a consistent image across all communities. But various smaller players and bigger players, depending on whomever they might be. In my community, the Denver Regional Council of Governments oversees the Vanpool program, and it is operated by a third-party provider. But certainly smaller programs like the Fort Collins one that I mentioned are great complements to that. So I'm not sure if I'm answering the question about the difference between both, other than to say the more the better, and where you can get bulk level pricing maybe through a large agency like a DOT, absolutely pursue that.
I think I would agree with you, Stuart. Basically, you want to make sure that there's a vanpool program there, and if you can't get it done one way, you need to do it the other.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that is unique to us in Washington is that all of our vanpool programs are in transit agencies, and so we're all public providers, and so we work together. You know, again, Victoria let me steal her presentation so that I could have more than one Facebook page to show on my presentation. We try to have similar policies, and we try to help each other out. And even though For example, the King County Metro van does not look like my van. I know from what I know Stuart is telling us the truth because people call us about vans that don't belong to us and tell us they want to join the red van that they saw at so-and-so Park and Ride, and unfortunately I have that white institutional van. And so it's kind of interesting, and I think that a regional approach, I can see how that would give you more options and make it easier on the customer. We know we all put Right Here Online's information on the back of our van so that there's kind of one place for people to go. But I think it actually, a regional program probably is easier than individual smaller programs in terms of serving the customer.
Okay, we are down to our last few minutes for the webinar today, so before we close with our last couple of questions, I just want to thank everyone again for participating and especially thank Stuart and Carolyn for presenting and taking questions. So the last couple of questions that I want to bring up, one is that Leslie is looking for what the minimum number of people you would recommend for starting a new Vanpool, and Alexa is looking for more examples of social media campaigns along the lines of "it happened on my commute." In other words, we're interested in additional ideas that other programs have had a good response from. So unless you have personal familiarity with it, you may not be able to answer that here, but I think it's a question that's worthy of looking into and providing for the future.
Yeah, Metro has a great campaign, On My Van, I Can. And so it's that same kind of thing, people talking about sleeping, listening to books, etc. And what I will do is I will gather some more and put that together and send that out if that would be helpful for people.
And as far as starting a van, I like to recommend that we start with 7. And then try to fill that up, give them about 3 months of empty seat subsidies to get that to capacity. But also, some regions have been very successful using different sizes of vans based on the number of individuals that are interested. And so
half of my fleet are minivans, and so I start vans with 5.
Oh, great. Because
I have 7-passenger vans, so I have some 7-passenger vans. So for me, I start with 5 and then subsidize those 2 empty seats, and then, you know, I have 12s and 15s also, but I tend to start with 5.
Okay, great. I do not see any additional questions. So at this time, I'd just like to say thanks again. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I do want to share, there was a question earlier, or a conversation earlier about Fort Collins. And the answer from the Fort Collins expert on the call is that there are 80 Vanpools on the road plus 13 backup vans.
Yahoo!
Great.
So with that, I think, again, I want to say thank you to everyone for participating. Appreciate all of your attention and your good questions, and look forward to hopefully doing this in the future. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Phil.
Before you wrap it up, I just want to say thank you to you for leading this as well, and of course for Phil, who's always there and always helpful.
Thank you. Thanks, Phil.
Thanks, everybody. If everybody take a few minutes before they leave to complete the evaluation online, that'll help us to improve future webinars. And as a reminder, those that have joined late, in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, it looks like 3 sheets of white paper. If you click there, you'll be able to download PDF copies of both Stuart and Carolyn's presentations. And the recording for today's presentation should be available for within 48 hours, and we will post it, send a notice out to the listserv and send it to the toward ACT members as well. So on behalf of the Vanpool Council of the Association for Commuter Transportation and the National Center for Transit Research, we thank you for joining us and look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.